I want to go a little bit deeper on the Urbit thing because I'm curious what you're seeing there. Like in the Web3 space, it seems to be the area where at least memetically, and I know you guys have a whole podcast on the trad wife aesthetics and that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
it seems in Web3 the Urbit community is pushing that, like, no, it's cool to have kids, it's cool to have trad vibes, it's cool to be a strong dude, it's cool, that kind of stuff.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
if they're doing that, then hopefully they can be one of the people who joins us in the future.
Yeah, I think I think there's some stuff to explore there. We have actually some calls, not related to our podcast, but maybe we'll talk to them about the podcast too, related to the business that we run, Spark Blocks, just finding potential opportunities to collaborate with some of their cultural movement-esque stuff. They have a very, very unique strategy that I think you, again, I'm not sure your level of knowledge of it, but I think you might appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll dig in more.
I mean, the whole, like, what is it? Based, Dime Square, New York art scene, right?
Yes,
it's like they're really perpetuating all this
base
base memetics, right? There's an overlap with them and Urbit. So a lot of those like New York art scene people are into the Urbit stuff. And there's just like this memetic pressure cooker going on that I think you might want to tap into. I think there's some really good consumers of the
How
Red
would you
Scare
suggest,
podcast.
if I was going to start
digging
digging there, where would I look? Where would your viewers look to learn more about this?
I think like the Red Scare podcast is probably like the top tier media distribution channel at this point. They've kind of become mainstream, but it's like Dime Square is the whole art movement, but just that intersecting with Urbit. They have parties and stuff. I mean, Urbit's having a big conference in Lisboa, Portugal in a couple weeks. So I don't know what they're up to, but every conference that they've had, they've made some pretty big moves. And like they're connected to like Milady, for example, the NFT project. You don't have to be into that kind of stuff. It's a weird art. Let's just call it like a weird art project with some accelerationist philosophical undertones. But it's just an example of the way in which they're tapping into this fringe artistic culture to spread a lot of their memetics and kind of create a sense of like they are the avant-garde and they're cool, right? So anyway, I think there's a lot
that sounds good.
values.
Yeah, I gotta get on that. We tried to get on the Red Scare podcast, but they're difficult to contact, which is a shame because I know that people in the Red Scare community really care about us. Like they either hate or love us. So because I know from the subreddit, that's one of the subreddits we often get people talking about us in. But
it's a mixed group. You have a lot of authentic people, I think, that really want to move towards something else. I want to build a better world. But then in that same group, in that same kind of tone, in that same scene, you have a lot of nihilism and just like trash talk and bashing. And so it's a weird mix of those two things. And you got to kind of filter out like the gems from the poison,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, within any sort of status hierarchy like that, they're going to engage in those sorts of trash talk and everything. And it's right now the social circles that we are much more familiar with is like Teapot Twitter, the post-rat community, the rationalist community, the EA community. Those are the communities that we're most familiar with, and these guys seem weirdly unoverlapping.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of the Urbit people seem to be kind of overlapping with EAC. I feel like it's an incremental thing. I'm seeing on Twitter, like more and more people are adding it to their profile and stuff. So that's actually one of the things that we wanted to touch on. So EAC is this thing. I keep reading more about it. I keep seeing more people add it to their profile. I mentioned earlier that it felt like your description of implementing a DAO for educational purposes felt very EAC. So that's, for the listeners, that's effective accelerationism. I've also heard some people say ethical accelerationism, but effective seems to be more accepted. Do you have an opinion on that? And does that integrate at all or factor into
the movement at all? But I'm writing into something to look into.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, it's like Gary Tan is the president of Y Combinator, and he has that in his Twitter bio. So and so does Martin Shkreli. So Martin Shkreli makes you feel like it's like some fringe thing and some trolling cultural thing, but then Gary Tan has it, and you're like, well, maybe not. And Mark Andreessen has it, I think, in his profile as well. So there's a lot of conversations that are popping off around that. I think a good podcast, actually, a perfect podcast for you to be on if you haven't already, is a Moment of Zen.
I haven't done them yet.
Yeah, Moment of Zen. They're in the Turpentine network, that whole network. I think what's the big one? The All In podcast is the big one in that network, but there's a lot of founder people, Web3 founder people that are interested in, I think, a lot of the same stuff you guys are interested in. But A Moment is End's a good one, and they talk about the acceleration stuff a lot. Mike Solana's Pirate Wires, that's another good one as well. Mike Solana's a little bit of a Thiel protege.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with this sphere, which is interesting because, you know, we were just at this conference and it felt like everyone we know was at the conference, the Manifest conference, where it was like, you know, Richard Hanania, Ayla, Robin Hansen, Curtis Yarvin, Alexander, Scott Alexander. And I'm like, well, that's everyone accounted for. And now I'm learning there's this whole other sphere I need to be aware of and politicking within.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap, and I think there's going to be inevitably a lot of convergent overlap. There's just the logical conclusion. So I think a lot of these conversations, it's going to be less sides and more like ranked choice voting, you know, just with being a part of different groups. Like, yeah, I might, you know, participate in Urbit. I might check out the charter city you're working on.